My name is Jay Borger, and I work as a psychobiologist at the company Leergewoonte. In Leergewoonte, we help different individuals, teams, and organizations in improving their well-being and their learning capabilities by means of different scientific insights of the brain and behavior. So today we're going to discuss a bit more about how you can control stress in a more efficient way, hopefully by means of evolutionary insights. So I'm convinced that the human, I think most of you also are convinced that the humans are a long product of an evolutionary process, and better understanding how stress and behavior works. Therefore, I think you need a really evolutionary perspective because it can give you a lot more insight in the way you behave or not. So this is what we're going to talk about for today. We have half an hour for this, so let's get started. So the main theme of today, of course, is also stress. So how to recognize stress, how to manage stress. So I think it's also interesting to start with just a general question about stress. And the question is just simple, what is stress? So what does stress entail for you? So please, if you want to answer the question in the chat, just think about the words that pop up when you think about stress. And just present your answer in the chat. Overwhelm, pressure, I see work, some work indeed. I see headaches, so things you experience. Feelings, panic, tension a lot. Frozen, yes, also a reaction indeed. Hurry, anger, confused, quick and anger. Yeah, so thank you all for responding and being so active in the chat. So as you can see here, I think that there are a lot of ends which are quite good related to the construct of stress. But you can also note that there are quite some constructs that relate to this topic. And if you want to define stress, it's quite difficult because it's a complex structure with different elements, as you see. It can be something like pressure, something you experience. It can be a headache. It can be a tight feeling. It could be heart palpitations. It could be many different things that are related to stress. And if you would look up the word stress in the dictionary, you find something like mental load or pressure, which are also quite specific, but also a bit more maybe general terms. And we as a team also thought about, okay, what would be a good way of describing stress in such a way that you also can make use of it by steering a bit if you want to be more or less stressed in some cases. And eventually we came with the following definition, and the definition is that stress is a balance between two elements, and the elements are your load, so things that cause tension, such as higher workload, conflicts at work, or maybe in your personal atmosphere, or maybe in your cultural organization, in relation to the capacity. So the capacity to deal with these different loads, such as a healthy sleep rhythm, social support, or physical conditions. And if these two are imbalanced, let's say there's a lot more load, so there's a high workload, you have to do many things in a short amount of time, and you don't have a healthy sleep rhythm or not experiencing much social support, you can indeed experience stress, and if it's for the long run, it's definitely, I would say, a problem eventually. But again, it could also be possible that you experience quite some workload, so you have to do many things in a short duration, a short time, and if you also find yourself having a lot of support from your work, from your colleagues, from your supervisor, from your friends, you are still able, I think, to deal with this workload. So it's all about balance, and then you can speak about just a healthy tension, which is of course something that is also helpful. Okay, so it's a really quick way of describing stress, and also in a more practical way that you can use it by yourself. So how is my load in relation to my capacity to deal with this load? Okay, I know this group I'm speaking to is coming from different European countries. So I also thought, well, are there any numbers available that say something about the number of workers or people who experiencing stress during their day. And I found one study, a study which was conducted during 2019, I guess, under 1,500 people, and the results stated that about 70% of the European workers occasionally experience unhealthy stress at work. So unhealthy means a burden. It feels like a burden. So regarding this number, you could say, you could imply that European workers indeed feel some kind of stress during the day occasionally. So that we are stressed, that maybe you could imply from this research. So that was an interesting thing I found. However, on the contrary, I found also something else, which is that if we look at the happiness scale, so there's a scale which presents the most happiest countries in the world, that out of the 10 happiest countries, 7 are European. So in most European countries, people feel quite stressed, but also satisfied or happy. And this feels a bit paradoxically, right? So being stressed, but also being happy. So I thought, what could be an explanation of this phenomenon? And one thing I will try to explain from a more evolutionary standpoint is the principle of hormesis. It could be one explanation why you feel stressed, but also feel quite happy. And hormesis is an effect that if you present someone or an organism with a small toxic dose or a small dose of a specific dose of stress, this organism will eventually grow from it, will be more resilient, will become better after it. So I already named it like organisms. So if you think back in evolution, we also came from plants. Yeah, it's maybe a strange story, but it's true. And eventually, if you look at plants, they also have the effect of hormesis, just as we also have the effect of hormesis. So if you look at plants in the wild, they're able to grow under really hard circumstances through the concrete. But if you look at, let's say, a plant in my room, it will die immediately after having not being fed water for 1 week. Yeah, why is that? Well, the plant in the wild has so many things he has to conquer. There are hard weather conditions. There are bugs eating the plant. There is garbage falling on the plant. There are so many things. The wind who is also trying to test the plant. So there are many things that give some stress to the plant. But if it is in the right dose, the plant will grow even better out of it. In comparison, the plant in my room doesn't get any difficulties. So it's inside. There are no bugs there. Just get water. There's no wind. It's a healthy and chill life. But still, if it's deprived from water just a week or two, it will quickly die. So in other words, having some stress, specific doses, it's all about balance, of course, can help you indeed to grow and to accelerate. So that's the thing I want to share with you here. One principle we see everywhere. It's the same like working out, right? So if you work out in the gym, your muscles get a bit stressed. They will break down, but eventually, if it's in the right dose, it will grow bigger, which is also a form of hormesis. So this is like the biology of all organisms, which could be one clarification of why we feel maybe stressed, but also feel quite happy because it helps us further. Okay, well, I want to talk about stress, of course, of today. And now we just discussed a number of people who are, let's say, experiencing stress in the European countries. I talked a bit about the clarification, about the relationship between stress and happiness. And now we're going to delve deeper into the stress systems. So each mammal, each human has a specific stress system that kicks in when you feel stress, and also to deal with stress, of course. And to tell you a bit more about the stress system, I have to take you way back to the time we had a common ancestor. And the common ancestor is seeing here, the ape just chilling on a tree, when suddenly danger appears. A lion sneaks up the monkey. At that moment, the monkey has 3 automatic reactions he can perform. And maybe you do know which one I'm referring to. Maybe you can let me know in the chat. Yeah, it's fight, flight, fright, freeze. Yeah, indeed. I see a lot of good answers indeed. So the thing the monkey could do is to freeze. So that's always the first reaction. It's the freeze reaction. It could also be hiding, right? Freezing. Then it could decide to fight the lion in this case, or to flight. So to run away from this lion. And these reactions will kick in automatically after the stressful thing is happened or stressful thing is experienced or seen. So the monkey doesn't have to think about it. It's an immediate, acute, direct reaction. It takes over his behavior and it helps the monkey to survive already for, let's say, millions of years of evolution. And this same system, stress system, is also prevalent in our system as human. And I want to show you that even for human, this stress system is still really helpful in surviving in some cases, and that I want to show you by means of a short video. So what did you see? Well, the person who is jumping away from the car first freezes, so that's always the first reaction. You freeze and then just quickly jumps away and afterwards thinking, okay, what just happened? So the thinking brain is a bit shut down and the stress system, the automatic system, is taken over the whole behavioral system, so to say. And eventually this form of stress was life-saving in this case. Well, there are also other instances or other examples in which your stress reaction is maybe not that helpful, and this I want to exemplify by the next video. So again, it's of course a bit of a mean joke, but still, I think you get that, right? So everyone knows that there are no dinosaurs left on this planet. However, if you see the dinosaur in an instant, your stress system automatically takes over, running, freezing. I didn't see anyone fighting, but still, it could also be one reaction. But it's really helpful. It has been really helpful in all those thousands and millions of years in surviving. So it's still prevalent and not always maybe helpful. In some cases, it could be, for instance, with the car, but with this example, it's not that really logic to run from this dinosaur, which is not real, of course. Well, the thing I want to tell you is that this stress system is also a generic stress system. So it doesn't matter what types of stressor you experience. If it's a lion you see in the wild, if it's a boss commanding you, or a colleague, or a friend, or a family member, or it is notifications who are coming in every minute, each time your stress system is being activated. The fight-flight response is being activated. And of course, there is some discussion about if we experience now more stress than before, mainly because all these notifications are quite abstract, elusive, repetitive. They're more prone, right? And the stress system, the fight-flight response, is not really adaptable or adapted to these types of stressors. So it's maybe possible, of course, to fight or flight or run from a lion. You could also maybe do it with your boss. Let's say at least avoid the boss, run away from the boss. But fighting your inbox is not that helpful, because running away from your inbox is also not helpful, because it will be still present. You have to do something about it. So it's a generic stress system, and the question is, do we experience more stress now? I think it's still under debate. You could also say, just sitting here now, just watching this masterclass, you're sitting indoors. I think you're well fed, you're well slept. Well, those things were not that normal, let's say 1,000 years ago for human. They had to work hard, they had to find food, shelter. So I think there are also less stressors, but maybe the forms of stressors nowadays are a bit different. Okay, then again, if you see something stressful, here you can see also an image of it. Let's say if you see something, it will go through your eyes and will enter a specific region in your brain, which is called the thalamus, which is a sensory information processing region, and then it quickly will activate the amygdala, and the amygdala is in essence an emotional center of your brain, which will then directly activate the rest of your body to perform a fight, flight, or fright response. And it goes really quickly, like your whole body will be activated. So some parts will be activated and some parts will be inhibited. So maybe the question for you again, so which bodily functions are stimulated or inhibited by stress? So again, think about what your body needs when you have to fight, flight, or freeze. So maybe you can give me some ideas in the chat. So what happens when you're under stress? Which parts are stimulated or inhibited? Let me see. Heart rate elevates. Yes, indeed, Floris. Increase heart rate, see muscle tension, ability to think will change. No hunger, which is also stomach, indeed. Adrenaline, indeed. Rational thinking is inhibited. Yes, correct. Sweat. So I already know that you know quite a lot, of course, which I can imagine. Of course, this is, of course, in some way also the basic, but still, it's really interesting to see that there are many different things that are changing in your body, which is logical. So every time you're stressed, your body tries to help you in surviving. So it will present you with more energy to your large muscles to fight, to feel ready to flight maybe, or to freeze. That's why you also feel a bit of a tension. Your heart rate pumps because it has to be more. There has to be more blood to your brain, also to be alert and maybe focus. So things will change always in your body when you feel stress in a specific way to fight, flight, or freeze. And we also know by science that you have a tendency, or everybody has a tendency to have a bit more of a, let's say, a favor or a natural favor to choose fight, flight, or freeze as a response when during stress. And that you can also see by the next video about the stress response, the 3 fight, flight, and freeze responses. So you could flight, in this case. You could fight. Or you could freeze and flight, run away. So for each person, it could be a bit different. It really depends on maybe your genetics, but also things you have experienced before. And if you would enter the police academy, for instance, you also get a stress test, and they always test you on what type of stress is your go-to way of dealing with stress. In most cases for the police, it's about fighting. So most are not afraid to confront someone with a conflict. So that's really also interesting for yourself. Think, what is my typical stress response in most cases? Well, you could also delve a bit deeper into it because you have the 3 responses, but these 3 responses will give you some signals that you could also recognize. And I think as fast as possibly recognizing these different elements will help you also to combat stress a bit more easier. So these stress signals could be different. For some could be a bit more physical, for the other one a bit more emotional. For me, I know it's about shrugged shoulders and maybe a bit on the edge of restlessness, indeed, with my feet, for instance. So every person has a bit of a different variation of these different stress signals. So it's really important to decide for yourself which one are my stress signals. And then you could also keep track of it. So how often do you experience stress, at what moments, and then what kind of level do I experience these stress signals, so to say. So here you can see a client of ours who also kept track of their stress levels during specific moments. So as you can see here, there are moments that this person feels stress, maybe a bit, let's say before lunch or at the end of the day or waiting. There are some moderate forms of stress, so when he has to make a phone call or start the day. And there are also moments of stress which are more stressful, really stressful, let's say a deadline report or giving a presentation. So if you keep track of this and if you know, okay, these are my triggers, then you can also decide what kind of strategy is needed. So for instance, maybe a start of the day would be something different as a strategy to deal with it than when you have to give a presentation. And you can also decide for yourself, maybe I should start with the more easier one. That could also be before lunch, right? And then just work up my way towards the harder ones to get some more control of it. Okay, there's also some research, of course, about what the typical stress triggers are, chronic stress triggers. And there was one meta-analysis, so that's a study in which they pile a lot of studies together. And this was a total of somewhat like 70 studies, I thought it was something like that. But eventually they gained some knowledge about what are the main factors you can see that are causing chronic stress, so stress on the long term. And this we're going to discuss after the first question, because I want to know what are your triggers of stress. So let's see if these are comparable to the answers we see by this study. So maybe you can tell me, what are your triggers of stress? It could be personal or it could be work-related. Uncertainty, making mistakes. Yeah, interesting. Conflicts at work, from Lucy. Social interaction, yeah, it's a really important one. Non-logical interaction. Decision making. Bug in program, yeah. Small talk, haha. Overly, could also be a stress for everyone. It's different, as you can see already here. So thank you for joining this chat. As you can see, there are quite some different things that can cause you stress. But if you look at the general things, we see a couple of triggers popping up. So in many cases, you think, or not, that the hours you make per week, that they are really important in you having stress or not. Well, it declares some of the portion of being chronically stressed, but it's 9% of all times, and lack of control, which is autonomy, a bit less, so 7%. But things that are more stressful, that cause stress in the long term, are things like role conflict. So two people above you tell you something others to do. So let's say one person would say you have to focus 30% of your time on data entry, and the other one is saying no, you have to focus for daily data entry for 70% of your time. And you want to feel good, and you want to help both, and this is also causing stress. Conflict, so this is more in the social domain. Work pressure, of course, and role ambiguity is about not having clear set goals or clear tasks within your profile, which is also leading to uncertainty and not knowing what to do, and then you perform so many things that maybe are not really in line with your current position or function. Okay, well, maybe you think this is a bit general, or maybe this doesn't apply to me. Well, there are also other forms of stress that can make you a bit more stressed over time, but they are not that present for you as these things are maybe in general. And this is a form which we call microstress, so really small doses of stress. And to exemplify this, I want to give a short introduction of a typical morning. And a typical morning starts with your alarm. So I think you have an alarm, it will wake you up, and then you probably decide to snooze, maybe once, maybe twice, which are already 3 forms of stress. Then you have your smartphone probably as your form of waking up, which give you a lot of negative news about the world, which is of course prevalent, sadly enough, but this is also a form of stress. Then you see some notifications coming in, you have to do something about it. You wouldn't do it already, but still they have some stressors effect on your system. Maybe a late night snack before because you watched Netflix somewhat longer than expected. You didn't sleep that well. You are hungry in the morning. Then you also want your coffee because you're dependable on your coffee. Then you have to make a decision. Decision is also a form of a stressor. Then you go outside and you think, oh no, I just decided for the wrong clothes because it's raining. Then eventually you enter your work. You see a lot of things that are implying things you have to do with. So different notes, things that are still on your list. And then you're sitting the whole day, which is also a form of a stressor. So of course, it's a bit of a funny version of your morning, but still, all these things are really changeable because you have your own influence on it. And the brain is always scanning for possible danger, and these things are also some forms of stressor in different ways. So thinking about how your typical morning is or day can also help you to alleviate you a bit more from your stress. Well, then we can focus a bit more on the tips. And I think this part is also important. First, discuss some challenges before we go to the tips. And the main thing is that nowadays we feel a lot of busy, of course. And most of you, I think, will also, because you joined this web, maybe feel a bit more stressed than they want to. And I think that there are so many things possible during those days that you are working. You want to work hard. You want to perform good. The client is king, right? You want to do things right, but it's quite difficult to manage all these different demands from yourself and your surrounding, which eventually leads to stress. And two things are really important to notice when talking about stress: having a really chaotic or really fully loaded agenda to manage your stress. And these things I want to discuss first before going to the tips. And the first challenge is that our brain is more wired to being focused on the negative. So maybe I think you're doing a lot during the weeks, you're doing quite a things quite good, but eventually your brain mainly focuses on things that you didn't achieve or didn't meet up. So I think it's really important to note that the brain has a challenge in to focus only on the negative. So let's say the example, you get some feedback. Feedback, of course, is a difficult part, but you get some feedback and the feedback is quite positive. So let's say this was the feedback. You did a great job on the project. Your presentations are always clear. You're a strong team player. You're highly reliable. And your work tends to lack attention to detail. Yeah, well, which one stands out? Yeah, probably the last one, of course, is the last one, which is also an effect. But still, your brain also focuses more always on the negative part. So even you have 4 positive things, the negative part will stand out. And again, if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. So being aware of possible threats. So being aware if someone is saying something bad about you is really important to make notice of, because abandonment from the group in the early days was really, really detrimental for you. It could mean that you would die, because being left out of the group, you wouldn't survive. You need the group. So this is a really important part to be aware of, that your brain is focusing on the negative because it's such a really helpful surviving mechanism. Then we continue with the second challenge, and the second challenge is about satisfaction. I think the most important part here is that satisfaction is really hard to maintain. So here you can see a figure, and that you see that the expectation is in most cases that if you get more achievement, more stuff, more acquisition, this promotion, that eventually you will be happy. That's a trick our mind gives us always. But in reality, this will drop quite quickly, and it also fluctuates a bit over time. And again, this is a really helpful, intuitive way of our brain, right? So let's take the example of being a hunter-gatherer, and you were really hungry. You were looking for something to eat, and you found an apple tree. And you ate an apple, and after the apple you were satisfied, and you wouldn't do anything more because you were happy. Well, this will eventually wouldn't help you, because you need to find shelter, to find more food, to help others, to reproduce. So things like wanting more are needed, and the satisfactions need to go down to get the work done. But every time you are prone to get more and more, and this time I think we are overwhelmed with different possibilities we could experience, we could buy. And what do? We want to run, we want to have more, acquire more, and eventually we are on a hedonic treadmill, which if you run too fast will lead to a faceplant. And this, of course, you want to prevent, which is the most important part. And therefore there are 2 or actually 3 tips I want to share with you at the end for this. And the first tip is that knowing that your brain is not really satisfied that quickly, and also not that long, is that you first have to focus on what satisfaction is. So satisfaction is not about what you have, but it's more about what you have versus divided by what you want. So if you want to be more satisfied and less stressed, you have to focus on have management or on want management. And one way of focusing on that is by focusing on gratitude. So gratitude, of course, is again a general tip, but still, if you place it in a specific way, it can really help you. So let's say when you feel overwhelmed or unsatisfied or stressed, you can use gratitude by making use of really specific questions. And one of these questions is, for instance, what went well today? So just focusing on the positive. There are a lot of things that are going well during the day, but your brain focuses only on negative. So to know more about the things that went well can really help you. Or what did I do for someone else? That's also a helpful form, because helping others gives you also a form of meaning. Or how could this situation have been worse? So in most cases, we cannot, of course, predict the future. So I think if we are more aware of the things that are going well, and I think if not somebody in your surrounding has died that day, it was a relatively good day. So catastrophize is one way to deal with it. And also, who made this easier for me? So I'm here, standing here, everything was well, nice, arranged. These things are really helpful for me, and also gratitude can help me to be less stressed in giving this presentation, and being aware of things others are doing for you can also help you. Then we enter the second tip, and the second tip is about the master the art of savoring. And savoring is all about amplifying and extending your positive emotion, because again, satisfaction will not remain for long, and you also are prone to focus more on a negative. And here I also present you just with some general forms or tips which can be maybe help you to be a bit more creative about how to master the art of savoring. And one way would be just to share your successes more often. So discuss during check-ins or meetings what went well, and of course what you can improve on, but being more aware of what went well can help you. Maybe collect positive things. You could think about photos, you think about notes, and you can revisit them quite often. Maybe you could create like, let's say, an I'm awesome file. So if you get some positive feedback in the chat or during in your mail, just archive them in a specific folder and look at it regularly to help you and to see that you're quite doing well. And also use your senses. So if something is going well, think about what you can do to amplify this feeling. It could be as easily as just drinking coffee. Instead of like pouring it down really quickly, you can also take a bit of focus, slow down, and really enjoy the coffee, because those positive moments bring also a really easy way of more positive impact during your day. Okay, then I will enter the last tip. So hopefully these things are also in general just things you can think about. They are just forms you can use. So think about what will be helpful for me. But for the second or the third one, I would say is a bit of another tip. And this one I want to introduce by means of a specific question. It's maybe a bit of an odd question. And the question is, what is the order of the group size of your distant cousins? Well, this is a really strange question, but again, we're taking an evolutionary standpoint, and your distant cousins, I mean the orangutan, if I'm saying it right, the baboon and the gorilla and the human. So again, if you would see those cousin species in the wild, what will be the group sizes and what will be the smallest group size, and then again the bigger and the bigger and the bigger. So maybe you can let me know in the chat. So what's the smallest and what is then the next one, the bigger group, if you would encounter them in the wild, and what will be the biggest eventually? Smallest orangutan. Monkeys, humans the biggest. I see most humans the biggest, one baboon the biggest. It's giving me stress. It's a difficult question, yeah. I can imagine. I will help you afterwards, yeah. Baboon, gorilla, orangutan. Well, thank you again for joining me in the chat. Well, if we look in nature, and if we look at the orangutan, for instance, that's indeed the smallest one. So orangutans can weigh 100 kilogram, a male, but they mainly live in the trees. So in the trees, they are safe. They have no predators in the trees, almost none, maybe some snakes, but still small groups is sufficient enough to be and to feel safe. Well, the next group is then the gorilla. Well, the gorilla, a male gorilla, can be 10 times as strong as a human male. So they really have strong force. They do need indeed some numbers to feel safe, but 10 to 25 is enough to feel safe and to just go about their day. Then the next one is the baboon. So maybe you've seen the baboon once somewhere, but they have big teeth, but still they're quite small. So they need indeed a bigger group to help them to feel kind of a safe environment. And if we look at humans, they have some studies about the Hadza tribes, which are still prevalent in Tanzania and those regions, and also other studies show that humans normally live in groups of around 150, 250 people. So what I want to say with this is that we humans need the group dynamic to feel safe, to get support, to work together, and this is really needed as humans to feel or to be in more control of stress. And there are so many studies just telling you this. So there's one study of Harvard in which they studied hundreds of people for their whole life from when they were 19 years old until 90. So there are still some 90 plus people, participants alive. And they studied everything you could think of. They did brain scans, questionnaires also with their family. And the most important factor which made them happy was the strength of their social relationships. So here the tip is also to think about how can I perform something that will help or strengthen my social relationships. So that's the last tip. So you could also form it a bit in offering instead of thinking of yourself, because if you offer social support, you will get better yourself, but also the other one will be in a better future eventually. And one way of doing this is by means of the 3-question technique. And you could do it maybe daily with your colleagues. Just start with a question like, which events from today have stayed with you? How do you feel physically and mentally? And do you have enough support? So this is just one way of dealing with this. Well, I gave you some tips, some information, some insights, of course. So really thank you again for your attention. But I think the most important part is this one. And that is that I can give you a lot of tips. Be grateful, savor more, find support, sleep well. And most of them are not new, right? But that's the problem. Sticking to these tips is the most difficult part. So really think about what can be the next step, just a small step I can do today to work maybe on these tips or something else that came up during this masterclass. And that hopefully will also help me to provide you with a less stressful day or more control over your stress. Okay, thanks all for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed this masterclass. And now we can go to the Q&A.
Yes, welcome to the Q&A. And Jay, thanks a lot for the masterclass. I think it was super insightful. And we also got some interesting questions. So I will just go right ahead with the first question, which is asked by Shannon. And she asks, some things cannot be avoided or postponed. So what is a good way to control stress reactions to things that are kind of out of your control?
That's a really interesting question. So again, stress is part of your life and will always be part of your life. And you also have to deal, of course, with a specific environment that will present you with some stress. So, of course, there are different ways. So you could, again, think about what she's already doing, Shannon. Think about what is my influence on it. Mm-hmm. So feeling a bit stressed about it is normal, I would say. But you could think, what can I do to change it? So can I talk to someone about it? Mm-hmm. Or can I not be a lot focused on the subject? So I know that there is something I have to do, but I can decide for myself, I think about the whole day, or just decide to do something else, or just to speak with someone, or just go for a walk, for instance. So you really have to think about yourself. So experiment again, what types of things will help me to alleviate a bit the stress I'm feeling from these things that are just everyday things that you cannot avoid.
Yeah.
Hopefully, is that a bit of a question, answer on the question?
What I sense in your answer is that there are things that are not in your control. So maybe focus also on things that are in your control.
Yeah.
Search for distraction, maybe. I could also sense that in your answer, and search social support in your surrounding by also speaking up about it.
Yeah, right. And maybe also pointing to the tips I just mentioned. You could also be thinking, okay, things are stressful, maybe are not going well, or maybe your mind is focusing on the negative. You could also think, okay, what do I have? So maybe thinking, what are things I'm grateful for now? So it could be even worse, right? So that's also a mindset. And thinking about that can also help you to, let's say alleviate a bit of the stress. That's also a way of dealing with it, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. Well, let's go to the next one. This question is from Radina, and she asks, can you be chronically stressed without truly realizing its impact? How can we better recognize when it's time to be more deliberate about relaxing or self-care?
Yeah, so I think maybe, I don't know, or maybe she's referring to the example I gave about microstress, because that is one form in which you're maybe not that aware of the stress you are experiencing. So you could think about, okay, let's just take the first step, and which is to spot what kind of signals I'm getting from my energy level, from my stress signals in my body, and these eventually, I think, will give you some insight, at least if you're not stressed or not. Because in most cases, also it could also be a micro stress, but it could also be that you are under really high pressure and you just work hard for longer times and you're not focusing on it. So you're not maybe per se aware of it, but you know it if you take a step back and think, okay, how am I feeling during the day or at the end of the day? Am I feeling stressed? How is my energy level? Do I wake up with a lot of positive energy? Do I feel that I'm loving my job or my things I'm doing? So decide for yourself, what is the cutoff? So if you know, okay, if I'm feeling this for a week, or let's say 2 more weeks, then I have to decide for myself, this is a good time to take a step back or take a step forward to change my behavior or to ask for help.
Yeah. So also zooming out of the situation and having a closer look on how you're really feeling.
Yeah.
And what are the biggest stressors in your life? Can be indeed the micro things or more the bigger things.
Yeah.
And then a question from Valentina. She asks, what are considered small or large stress doses in people that they experience?
Yeah, well, of course, stress is subjective in some kind of sense. So it's a subjective way also in describing it. But there is a range. So you could say you have stress in the small doses. Let's say your alarm goes off. It wakes you up. It's a bit of a stressor, which is not that bad per se, but it's a small dose of stress. Or something tells you you have to do something now. There's a deadline. It gives you some stress, but you know, I will manage, but give you some alertness, right? Some stress. I think that's a good way of stress, of course, but more in the range of being longer stress for a longer period and really high levels of stress. These can be noticeable again by your bodily functions, right? So if you feel very tired, if you feel a bit panicked, a bit agitated, not well rested, you're not thinking about your health or your physical health. These are signals, I think, that give some indication if you're dealing with high levels of stress, or maybe stress which are too high for a long period, and stress which are a bit lower or acceptable in some kind of way.
Yeah, so it's also searching for that healthy balance. So there are some smaller stressors that can also help you and are beneficial in a way.
Definitely.
But like the bigger stressors for a longer period, where you can really signal also in your body what it's doing. That's more the unhealthy higher doses on the longer term.
Yeah.
And then we have another question from Lauretta. I hope I pronounce it correctly. So aside from meditation, what are best things to do when you are constantly stuck in this flight or fight?
Yeah, well, so meditation is indeed one form to deal with the fight-flight response. And I'm convinced that there's no one solution. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. So there are many things you could do. And I think you should start with the simple one, right? So just meditation is about breathing, right? But you could also think, okay, just a simple deep breath could maybe help, or just walking. So your body has the response to fight or flight, so it wants to run. So giving a bit of the running or a bit of the reaction, it can also help to alleviate a bit of the stress response. So get out of the tension and just walk or just stretch. Those are just simple things you could do. But in some case, something else is needed, right? So it could be you should manage your sleep, or you should think about maybe your social support, or the organization you're working at. So it's really depends. It really depends on the current person, the personal history, right? So making small steps, just doing small experiments. Just okay, for now I'm feeling quite stressed. Make the decision to, let's say, do a walk in the park outside, and just notice for yourself, reflect on it. Does it help? If so, continue it. If not, no problem. Then just decide to do something else, and just find your way, a constructive way to deal with it.
Yeah, so it's super personal, what works and what doesn't. And also just experiment a little bit. What's working for your personal situation, what works best. And there are so many tools out there, indeed, that affect your state. So the last question already, it comes from Lucy, and she asks, what is the best way to cope with stress, and then specifically at the workplace?
So the best way to cope with stress, right? So then you think again about the influence you yourself maybe have. So that's one way of dealing it. But I think the most important part, and that's again my last tip, is think about the social support. So if you feel socially supported by your supervisor, by your colleagues, then you are capable of doing quite a lot of work and also deal with work stress quite good. And for this, of course, you also need your surrounding, right? So they have to perform, they have to help you, they have to ask questions, they have to give you constructive feedback. There should be a psychological safe environment, right? So these things are important, and not always under your influence, but at least seeking support. So we know that there are simple studies that if you have to perform for a presentation, let's say, and you have a small talk before with your colleague, you see that also your blood pressure, your heart rate will go down, you relax a bit more as compared when you don't have the support before. So it just find support, find a buddy to talk with. Just a simple question at the end of the day. It's, of course, it doesn't help in all cases, but it's one way I think that would help everyone if you find the right person, the right way of dealing with it in the social form.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always cool to see like how much the social influence, or we're social creatures, how important it is.
Yeah.
And it also has this huge effect on stress levels. So super insightful. Thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge. And thanks also at home for joining this masterclass and your nice questions. Hopefully we will see you at the next masterclass, and I wish you a good day. Bye bye.